Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Terry Woolman, and my guest today is soprano, conductor, artist, Barbara Hannigan. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, we'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of the show. So make it count and just request an invite to come on stage. And we encourage you and welcome you to join our conversation. Let me tell you about my guest today. Barbara Hannigan is a Canadian soprano and conductor known for her performances of contemporary opera. Hannigan moved from her hometown of Waverley, Nova Scotia, to Toronto at the age of 17 and began her studies at the University of Toronto, graduating with a Bachelor of Music in 1993 and a Master of Music degree in 1998. She continued her studies at the Banff Centre for the Arts, the Steans Institute for Young Artists at the Ravinia Festival, the Centre des Arts, Orford, and the Royal Conservatory of the Hague. Her passion for contemporary classical music began in her youth, singing her first world premiere at the age of 17. By 2011, she had premiered approximately 75 contemporary compositions. Encouraged by her peers, Barbara began combining her talents as both an orchestral conductor and soprano. Her album Crazy Girl Crazy, which featured her both as a singer and conductor, won the 2018 Grammy Award for Best Classical Solo Vocal Album, as well as Edison and Juno Awards. I remember that, by the way. Congratulations on that. Barbara's organization, Equilibrium Young Artists, focuses on mentoring young musicians around the world, and her recently created Momentum, Our Future Now, encourages other leading artists and organizations to support and mentor young professional musicians. Barbara Hannigan, welcome to Making It.
Terry, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. That's just super sweet. I'm
You're
really
welcome.
happy to be with you today.
Likewise, this was a fun one to coordinate because you're in France and I'm in the United States right now.
Yeah, and you're really far away in the United States. So you're like almost 10,000 kilometers. I don't know how many miles that is, but it's really far.
Oh, you think in kilometers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the conversions either. It's kind of interesting, actually. Yeah. Well, growing up in Canada, were you bilingual growing up? Did you speak French, or was that not until you moved to Toronto?
Actually, we took French at school. So around age 9, we started taking French in school. But prior to that, I'm from an English-speaking family, so I learned a little bit of French in school, and I loved it. And but I didn't. And I would use it. If I was working in France, I would do my best. But I didn't really start to speak French on a regular basis until I moved to France, which was about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And other languages? Do you speak German and Italian, or just enough to get through?
Well,
being an opera singer.
I speak Dutch because I lived in Amsterdam for a long time and I studied in Holland for a while. So I speak Dutch and I can get by with German. And of course, when I'm singing in all those languages, like I sing in, I've even sung in Tibetan.
You have?
Yeah. One piece I did was in Tibetan. I've sung in Greek, Latin, of course, Italian, French, German, Czech, Russian.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of languages, and you have to know, you have to have like a very easy, natural translation of everything you say memorized in your head if you don't speak the language. But I can get by in kind of the main languages.
So we have something in common besides music. We both share birthdays with siblings,
That's
but in a
right.
different way. You have a twin brother?
Yeah, well, yours is even better. Your story is way better than mine. I have a twin brother, Brian. He's 5 minutes older than me, and he was a drummer actually, and now he's a plumber. So he switched, but he kept it in a rhyming thing. So it was,
But you guys are really close. I
yeah.
know. And you both have a very broad um, openness to music. And you've said to me in our emails back and forth, because you're my favorite new pen pal, is is that he actually exposes you to certain kinds of music or influences you as a musician as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, my brother Brian, he's got a fantastic ear, and I remember when we were kids, he would hear something on the radio or whatever, and he'd go sit down at the piano and start to play it and figure it out. And that wasn't my forte. I didn't have that development at that time. And even though he left the music profession as a career, he is like so into all kinds of music. He loves metal. He knows a lot about metal. Um, and but I mean everything, and he really listens. And like he was coming to a festival I was doing actually in California, the Ojai Festival. He
Oh
was like,
yeah,
yeah, he
I'm
was like,
playing there on Wednesday in
"Oh,
Ojai
you
tomorrow.
are?
Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
gonna be
gosh.
driving up there. Yeah,
Oh, I love Ojai. Say hi to the town.
I
Yeah,
will.
yeah. And anyway, when he was at Ojai, and he would go to different concerts, and he went to this concert from a string quartet, a really modern string quartet called Jack String Quartet. And afterwards, he was talking to them, and he was describing to them like what the pieces were, what the effect of those pieces had on him. And they were like, "Wow, you should write our program notes," because like he had such a cool take. So I always value his opinion on whatever I'm doing, and we both also really love the music of John Zorn, and so yeah, he's super super open minded.
Hmm. By the way,
But
you
your
mentioned
story's better.
right. You mentioned my story's better, so just so we don't leave people hanging.
Yeah.
Uh, I share a birthday with my two brothers. There's three of us in our family, three siblings. We all share the same birthday, October 20th, different years.
That's crazy.
It really is. I'll have to
That
send
is
you. There's a newspaper article of us in the Miami Herald where we grew up when my younger brother Michael was born. I'll find the photo and email it to you because
yeah.
we were in the paper because it was such a unique thing.
Well, yeah, it's very special.
Yeah, I didn't celebrate my first birthday by myself until I was in college in music school.
And did
Yeah.
you have like did you have special birthday party? Like, because as a twin, like I remember my mom when we were little, because my birthday's May 8th. And so I would invite 7 girls, and Brian would invite 7 boys. And my mother would make a scavenger hunt, when you have clues and stuff and you have to go
Mhm.
from place to place. And she would do 2 different scavenger hunts for the 2 groups. And then we'd all join at the end for cake and ice cream and pizza or whatever.
Which was really fun for you, right?
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, I didn't like that as much, because we each got to invite, 4 friends, 5 friends, whatever it was. Um, but we were all just sort of thrown together and didn't have the individuality of our birthday parties. I love it again now,
Yeah,
because they're my brothers. I love them, and we reach out
right.
to each other and from across the globe. But
Yeah.
it was really odd, being in Boston and in music school and finally having my very first birthday by myself. I kind of liked it. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. So before we talk about music, there are cats and cooking on a personal level that I want to talk about. So you
Great.
choose. You choose.
Well, we can talk about my cats. I don't know if they're going to show up, for today's show.
Hmm.
They're around. The sun is still out. The sun sets really late here, so it's 10 after 7 now here at night, but we've still got a lot of sun, and they love the sun, so they're probably lying in the sun inside the house somewhere. But the crazy thing about the pandemic was that I got stuck in one place.
Which is new for you because you've been traveling your whole career.
Yeah, I mean, I left home at age 17, right?
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, I was in one place longer than I had been in more than 25 years. And there were these, I was in Bretagne, which is in the north coast of France, and northwest coast. And there were these cats that were kind of wild and living around the property. And they adopted me. And so there are now three.
Also, something else that you discovered, or you didn't discover, but I mean, you started doing more of during pandemic is has to do with knives because you love cooking.
Yeah.
And so you've been traveling with knives, which you can't typically do, of course, when you're getting on airplanes.
Well, if you put the knives in your suitcase and you check the bag, then it's okay.
Hmm.
But you obviously can't take them in your carry-on. But I never travel, only carry-on, I
Right.
always love
Of
it.
course.
Um, and yeah, because being on the road, as soon as I discovered that I could rent an apartment instead of a hotel, and this was long before Airbnb,
Hmm.
I would just rent apartments and I would travel with my knives and a small suitcase of spices or particular, condiments or whatever that I like to have and like to cook with. And it became a thing for me. It really, because I would kind of set up shop wherever I was, and it made the touring easier,
Hmm.
because I was always alone. I never toured with a band. I was like the
Right.
soloist, so I was alone, and so it helped me feel more at home.
Hmm.
And so I still do that, and I'm heading off to Sweden next week, and I rented an apartment there for a week, and then I'll go directly to Munich and another apartment there, and sometimes I'll go back to the same apartment so I know what's there, which is
Oh,
great.
that's nice. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's great that you do that. Plus,
yeah.
you stay grounded and connected, but you also stay healthy by
I,
doing that.
you're absolutely right. That's the thing. I always say this to young singers, like, if you eat in a restaurant, if you get takeout all the time, you have no idea how much salt or sodium or fat or what kinds of different fats are in that food. And it's important to try and control, um, as much as you can, the nutritional levels, and also, working out and all that kind of stuff. And I also find it really relaxing at the end of a long day of rehearsal to go home and cook for myself. It's
Hmm.
just, like you say, it's really grounding.
What is your workout routine to stay healthy? Because you have a background as a dancer as well,
Well,
so
I do.
exercise is not new to you.
Yeah, but I never, like I took dance classes when I was younger, but I never was a professional dancer, even though I have now danced in a lot of shows. So
On
that's
point.
good. But my sport of choice is running.
Huh.
I love cardio. And especially like when I was in junior high school, so like age 13, we had a cross country running team and we had a really good coach, and he also taught us how to meditate.
Hmm.
And he was a very special man, Mr. Lavoie. He was our French teacher, our running coach, but he was really a very spiritual person. And so I joined that team, and he taught us how to run. He taught us how to stretch, and he taught us how to focus when you're running, like real style of running. And I just kept at it for my whole life.
Hmm.
And, I like to do some weight training or Nautilus or whatever, but really for me, it's the cardio, it's the running. That's my thing. And I think everybody has, an affinity for one kind of physical activity or another. So that's mine.
That was mine as well. I
Oh yeah.
ran long distance too,
Oh,
and yeah, it was wonderful. So I understand the
yeah.
feeling of having great training and
Yeah.
and also breaking through limitations.
Yeah.
Learning to get on the other side of cramps and difficulty breathing, and then there's this freedom that
Yeah.
happens when you get on the other side of that.
Yeah. I was reading a book, actually. I'm reading it now, by Murakami, this Japanese writer. And he it's a it's about his writing and his running.
Oh,
And it's a really beautiful book about, kind of those two things, and looking at it's kind of an autobiography, but through what running has meant to him in his life and at different points during his development as a novelist. So
I'll have
it's
to check it out. It sounds like it's kind of like a Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance.
totally, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, perspective.
Yeah.
So I've been watching you again a lot, in preparation for our conversation today. And I should preface by saying that you first came to my attention a couple of years ago with your 2015 performance with Sir Simon Rattle.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and what in the London Symphony, and what drew me in was your unique sense of humor, combined with your depth of your talent and knowledge as a classical singer. And I thought, I don't know who this person is, but I need to know her, because I thought it was it was just great. It was so over the top.
It was over the top.
Amazing musically, but completely funny to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, how refreshing that in the classical world that you had such a sense of whimsy, to be able to do that. So, and we can talk about that performance now or later as well. But I also saw your 2018 Tiny Desk concert, which was really wonderful. And you had said, I wrote this down because I found it really interesting. You said, I never imagined how these songs would work in an office. Because of course that's where you did it.
Yeah.
There's something that I wanted to ask you about as an artist, as a fellow artist. And it's about that moment when a song ends. And this has to do when you're conducting, because you're also very physical as a conductor and as a singer. But there's that moment. I want to know if you can describe that exquisite feeling, that moment when a song ends, that moment when your performance transitions from the present to a memory.
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. Yeah, there's that moment when you're, because you create a flow in a song, and that flow goes over into the silence. Like, it's not over when the sound is gone. There's still something, some kind of galaxy continuing. And so how long do you allow that and yourself to stay in it? Like, because I think there's a line between like indulging too much or like holding the audience hostage in your silence. So I've kind of once or twice felt held hostage by the conductor, who might have held the silence what I thought was a bit too long or whatever. And so it is an interesting thing, because there has to be a moment of suspension and then release. And it has to do with the breath, of course. Like, it has to do with I think when you must take the next breath is basically when there is the release. And that may be a long, slow breath, or it may be, And it's also interesting, like, as a conductor, somebody noticed the other day I was conducting the Mozart Requiem and the Berg Violin Concerto. And I had not noticed this, but someone said to me, oh, you never cut off a sound, especially because there's a choir in the Mozart Requiem. They said, you never cut off the sound like a normal conductor. I was like, oh, well, what do I do? And they said, oh, well, you kind of tick-tock, you kind of send it out. And I realized, oh, that's true. I do. I kind of, if I end a movement, I'll go, da, wah, and that's the cutoff. So
you release it.
Open. Yeah.
Right. It's open.
And it has to do with how I sing, because when I release a sound and I finish a sound, I often think about an exclamation point at the end of that sound. So the release of the sound has to be explosive as opposed to grabbing. Because if I grab, it's not free. And if I let it go, if I let it explode, it's free. And that means that there is a possibility for the breath to renew itself for the next line. So,
Or for the audience to then join you in the
next inhale.
Yeah, and the reflection of what had just happened. They get to exhale with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often think about, when I'm with the audience, I think about them coming in. So I don't go out. I let them come in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that also has to do with it, that hopefully if I'm breathless and exhausted at the end of the legatee piece you were talking about, maybe they are too.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe if I'm very calm at the end and kind of in the zone, they are with me in that. So
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of resonating together, breathing together.
I'm going to start incorporating that into my conducting, and just see what that feels like. Because it makes so much sense to do that. And so when you say you open yourself up to the audience, what is that you're doing? Obviously it begins with breath and intention. Are you opening your heart, your spirit, your experience?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah. I think I can usually feel it basically from the morning of a performance, and sometimes even a few days before, depending on how heavy it is, that I start to become, I can literally feel my system starting to open. It's as if the body kind of starts to turn inside out. And it's the closer I get to the performance, the more vulnerable I start to feel. And I became aware of this when I was a young performer, like a young professional. I noticed that I became kind of like irritable, extremely sensitive on the day of a show. And I was very young, so I didn't really know how to describe it. But I noticed that my sensitivity was becoming very, very, like, as if there were like feelers on everything around me, And so I decided that I had to kind of be quite protective on the days of performances, and not do anything new. But I also realized that when I go on stage, like I go early to the theater, I have a ritual that I'm usually very, very early, starting to get ready very, very early. And because I know that by the time I go on stage, I'm very open. And I consciously decided that I wanted to invite the audience in rather than going out to them, because it also, if I go out to them, it changed the way that my alignment was. My neck would go forward, and that would change my sound, just that 2 millimeters.
Right.
So if I invite them in, I sing better. I actually have a better sound. So it's a lot of things. It's a lot of all these different kind of perspectives that led to that understanding maybe of how things work best for me.
And that transfers directly over into your conducting as well, because you do both within the context of the same performance. You will conduct orchestral instrumental pieces, and then you will sing with the orchestra. By the way, is that part of how you decide baton or no baton?
Oh,
or is that based on the music?
It's not very often. Like when I started conducting, I didn't want to use a baton, and because I didn't have any training with it, and I felt like it was an extra thing that I might drop, and I have dropped it. I mean, most conductors drop their baton at some point in their career, but I was worrying about it. And I also felt like my hands are so expressive. And once I put a baton in the hand, then that hand with the baton no longer has the capability to express so much anymore. So I almost never use a baton now. Almost never. I used one for when I conducted an opera because it was easier for the singers to see it from far away, and it saved a bit my shoulder. But otherwise, I do everything with the hands. I know I can be super clear, and I don't need the baton to show extra clarity.
Yeah, it's crystal clear. When I watch you conduct, I get everything I need to get from watching you, not having been on the receiving end of it as a player, but as a audience member.
Yeah.
You are very much deep inside the music along with everybody, and yeah, your hands are very expressive, so it makes it fun to watch and easy to watch. I want to get something over with in this conversation, and I'll preface this by saying this had to do with your Grammy win, which congratulations, by the way. We didn't know each other back then, so I didn't get to congratulate you personally. But you weren't there at the Grammys because you were actually performing. But you had a conversation with previous Recording Academy President Neil Portnow, and he made some controversial comments about the lack of female winners on the Grammy broadcast, saying women who want to be part of the industry need to step up. And you clapped back, which I thought was great, and said, essentially paraphrasing, "You're bringing the focus on my gender instead of my work. All the conductors I work with, they don't have to deal with being called male conductors. They're just conductors."
Oh, yeah. So
without talking about being a female conductor and how cool that is, and we need more and all that, here's a moment for you to say whatever you need to say, not in a soundbite. Go.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting for me because when I started my career as a singer, of course, I was just a singer. Like nobody calls you a female soprano, like
right.
You're just a soprano, right? And then when I started conducting, for me, like the novelty was I'm a singer who then moved into conducting.
Yeah.
I wasn't really I was aware that once in a while there were questions about my gender, but I didn't think much of it. But then I started getting asked a lot of questions in the press, and I thought, and at first I was like, I don't want the questions and don't ask me that, just focus on the work. On the other hand, I realized, well, I didn't grow up seeing any women conducting orchestras. So there is a responsibility, and there is going to be conversation, and perspectives are going to change. And there are going to be kids that come to these concerts that are going to see me or another woman on the podium, and they're going to think, oh, that's normal, which is great, because I didn't think it was normal when I was 25. I'd never seen women conductors of orchestras. So my pet peeve with it at this time is that I notice that the women conductors get put into a group and we get compared to each other because we're female. And that I find really weird because, you know, I have something in common. Let's say I have something in common with Andres Nelsons, the conductor of Boston Symphony, because Andres and I are both very, very free in our gesture, so on. Or I might have something in common with Yannick Séguin, who's the chief of Philadelphia, because we're both Canadian. You know, you could compare me to him because we're Canadian. I mean, that would be as much of a reason to compare me to anyone. So I always find it's a little frustrating that for the moment, the women conductors, at least over here, we often get like, you know, compared to each other. And I think, why? Like, right. You know, you don't compare all the female cello players with each other. You just, you know, just compare cellists with sound.
You compare the cellist. Right.
So that's a bit my pet peeve, but I certainly do notice things changing. Like, and it's really funny because like I live in the middle of nowhere in Finistère, which means in Latin end of the earth, right? And in France. And I was on the beach 2 summers ago, this tiny little beach in the middle of nowhere. And this woman was sitting beside me on the beach who I hadn't noticed when I sat down. And she turned to me and she said, "Are you Barbara Hannigan?" I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I'm Ariane Matiak." And Ariane Matiak is a conductor. And we had never met, which is why I didn't recognize her. And here she was on this tiny beach right beside me. So here in this tiny area are two, and she's a major conductor. She's a major French conductor conducting all over Europe and so on. So here we are, like neighbors in the middle of nowhere, which is
wonderful. Yeah,
it's super great. Yeah.
So you become friends.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about risk taking, because you love taking risk. I know that one of your teachers, Mary Morrison, really encouraged you to not choose the safe route and rather pursue other heights which are not possible when one plays it safe under pressure.
Yeah.
And there's actually a quote of yours that I read saying the most special thing is to be free under pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. That when you get to the level of preparation, that you can be spontaneous, no matter what the pressure is. But that takes so much discipline, like you said in your intention at the beginning, you know, the discipline that one must have to get to that level of prep so that you can be free and so that you can be spontaneous. You know, that's when you can take risks. You can't really take risks if you're not fully prepared. That's my feeling. Like you could, but it's another world, you know. But it's a risk not to be fully prepared. But that's not the kind of risk.
It's kind of ironic, but yes, well said.
Yeah. But like that Ligeti piece that you saw me do in 2015, I mean, I had done that piece so many times. I knew it inside out and backwards, which is why I could be really free. And I was improvising. I mean, I was singing the music exactly as it was written, but all the acting stuff that I was doing, even the bubble gum, that was like a last minute decision just before I went on stage. I was like, can somebody go buy me some Hubba Bubba? And, you know, and all the physical antics of that within the rhythmic, you know, difficulty of the piece, that was because I was super prepared. I could do it. I never could have done all those things at one time if I couldn't sing that music in my sleep.
Right. Can you describe that for people who haven't seen it, and say the name of the piece and where people can find it?
The piece is called Mysteries of the Macabre, and it's by Ligeti, who's a Hungarian composer. And it's like 8-minute tour de force for a soprano and orchestra.
That's a long distance run right there. It was very physical. Yeah,
it was very physical. It's like virtuoso, like through the entire range of possibility, loud, soft, high, slow, super, super fast. One point I'm doing like a trill on a high C to a C sharp, and then I have to trill like, so it's da 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 da, and then there's another, you know, and on this super, super long note. Other times I'm like, you know, like super, super fast notes, and all has to be completely coordinated with the orchestra and the conductor. And it's, it took me a long time to learn. I learned it.
I can imagine. I mean, it's like Stravinsky. I mean, it's a really multi-metered piece of music.
That's for sure.
It's everywhere.
It's all over the place. And so you can't really fake your way through it. Like you have to name it. You know, so the first time I did it, you know, Ligeti, the composer who I revered, like, he was there, you know, I think he was in his 70s when I first met him. He was there. And, you know, if he didn't like your performance, then you knew about it, you know. So it was really great to sing it for him, and that he was into it. And it kind of solidified, you know, my relationship with him, but also it kind of, that piece launched me onto the scene in a particular way because, you know, I did it in LA. Actually, I did it with LA Phil and Esa-Pekka Salonen for Esa-Pekka's last season opener. Like it was a calling card.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Did you do that in character or did you do it?
I did in character. I had a different costume. I had a black leather kind of costume and and a wig and everything. So, but yeah, no.
So for anybody who hasn't seen it, the original costume was Catholic girl. Yeah, in high heels. The one that I saw.
The one you saw, the one you're talking about. Yeah, it was like a schoolgirl.
Catholic
schoolgirl outfit. Yeah, high heels and white knee socks and my hair in pigtails.
And
glasses.
Right, glasses with tape. And, you know, and high heels that you could barely negotiate, you know, which was really funny as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was really fun.
And engaging the, beautiful thing about that piece as well is engaging the orchestra in vocalizing and ripping up paper and shrugging and breathing. And,
Yeah.
it's fun. And it's fun to sort of shake the tree with an orchestra to do that. Of
To
course,
do.
Bobby McFerrin is playful as a conductor as well, like you. And the only other singer conductor that comes to mind, uh, when I watch you and I see you bringing both to the table, I would imagine there's more, but there was something beautifully freeing and playful about it that just loosens up the orchestra in a way
Yeah.
which they never get to do.
Yeah, it's true. And if you look at that video, you can see that the principal cellist, and he's got his hand in front of his mouth when I come on stage because he's trying not to laugh.
Right.
But it's funny you say Bobby McFerrin because actually, I never met Bobby McFerrin. I was always a huge fan, and I admired when I first heard him. It was through jazz and the layers of vocal stuff that he was doing, and then he was singing Bach. And I always wanted to work with him because I just thought he's the kind of person that I aspire to be, you know, not only because of the development of his skill level, but also because he seemed to be a very kind person, a very
Mm-hmm.
generous person. He wanted to share his music. He wanted people to feel welcome in what he was doing, to be able to do that too, you know? So it wasn't like, look at all the tricks I can do. He really welcomed them in. And then when I heard that he had started conducting and he took lessons, I think, with Gustav Meyer in
Hmm.
Michigan. And then when he started conducting, I was like, that's really classy, really, really cool. And it's funny because I've often been asked, like, why wasn't singing enough? Why did you conduct? And if you look at
That,
someone like Bobby
that's
McFerrin,
such an interesting question, though. Why isn't singing enough?
yeah,
Is almost odd to me. I am sorry to cut
it
you
is
off.
odd.
That just struck me because it's not about enough. It's that there's more. It's unlimited. It's a continued expression of who you are
Yeah,
as an artist and a person.
yeah, it's that unlimited feeling. And that's what Bobby McFerrin inspired and made me think, if he can do that, maybe I can also be free like that. You
Hmm.
know, if there's somebody out there that's doing that, maybe there's, you know,
So, have you met him yet?
no, I've never met him. I mean, I would love to meet him. Yeah, I've never met him.
I would imagine he would love to meet you as well.
No, I have to make that happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've made so many other wonderful things happen. Go make that one happen.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look forward to that. There you
Yeah.
go. Our audience likes that as well. By the way, if there's anybody in the live audience that would like to jump in the conversation, just make a request and I'll bring you up on stage if you have a comment or a question for Barbara. Now's a good time to do that. And while we're doing that, let's talk about your Grammy and that record, "Crazy Girl Crazy." Um, what was that process like, making that record? Because I know you weren't thinking Grammy, you were surprised that you won one.
Yeah.
But creatively, intention wise, how did that come about? The opportunity and how did you know which music to choose and et cetera?
Yeah. Well, my recording, let's say my recording career, um, I was nothing special. I would say like before about 2012, 13, somewhere around there. I would, sometimes I would do something and it would get recorded, and occasionally a piece that I really loved, like "Due to Your" piece, was recorded by Deutsche Grammophon, but I didn't have a relationship with any particular label. And then I did an album, 2 albums for a label in Germany called Winter and Winter, and that got some attention. And there was another label based in France and Belgium called Alpha. And the man that was coordinating everything for that label is a man named Didier Martin. And he had a meeting with me in 2015 in Paris. And we started to have a conversation about, let's say, like the atelier, like my atelier, like what's in my kitchen, like
Hmm.
what do I want to cook up? And I could tell from talking to him that he was, for the first time, I'd met somebody that was going to allow me to make an album that was really original in the way that I wanted it to be original. And because, a lot of singers, like a big debut album, it's just a recital or whatever. And this was not, I had no interest in that. I wanted to make something that had a kind of red thread, like a dramatic line that made sense to me. It had to tell a story. And I knew that as a conductor singer, the piece that was so important to me was, well, as a singer, the most important role of my life has been Lulu. I thought, well, when I was in high school, I sang the musical Girl Crazy, and those
Oh.
songs, Embraceable You, I Got Rhythm, But
Hmm.
Not For Me, Strike Up the Band. And I thought, yeah, it's about written about the same time that Lulu was written. And I thought, what I need is an amazing arrangement of that, like tailor-made, that I would sing
Hmm.
and conduct. And my friend Tom Morris, he put me in touch with Bill Elliott, he teaches at Berklee College.
Hmm.
He's a composer. He does arrangements for Broadway films. He won the Tony for American in Paris arrangements, orchestrations. So I got in touch with this guy who I'd never met. We
Hmm.
talked on the phone. I said, "You want to make an arrangement for me of these songs for the same orchestra, exactly the same instrumentation as Lulu. So, like, huge orchestra plus saxophone,
Hmm.
percussion, um, piano in the middle." And he was like, "Yeah." So we met, and we worked on this arrangement together. We put a lot of hidden messages in the music, in the Gershwin music together. And anyway, so we had those two pieces. And then I took another crazy piece by Berio, who's this Italian composer this piece was written in the 1960s, just for solo voice, about a woman in search of her home. And I felt like all of this tied together because there's this strange solo voice piece about a woman who wants to have a house where she can be. And then you go to Lulu, who is a powerful woman who was actually an orphan, homeless, and made her way in the world through sheer will. And then we go to the Gershwin songs, which are about the possession of being in love, being who you are. I got rhythm, I got music, I got my man. Who could ask for anything more? So it's like going from this journey of having nothing to having everything.
I
And
remember when I was in school at Berkeley, actually, and our first semester of conducting, we had to conduct the Rite of Spring, which was completely terrifying. Of course, that's typical Berkeley. They just throw you into the deep end of the pool, with no life support and say, go, do. And it was pretty overwhelming. And basically, my question to the teacher was, how do I switch from conducting a 3/4 bar to a 1/8 bar to a this or that? And he basically gave me some really good advice, which is, as long as you have a clear intention of why you're doing it, it will work. Let's talk about giving back. Equilibrium, Young Artist, and also Momentum, Our Future Now. Why is that important to you? And tell me about those organizations.
Well, I'd reached a point in my career that I basically was able to program what I wanted. I was able to work with who I wanted. And I thought, well, I absolutely have to start paying it forward because I can, you know?
Right.
And certainly I feel that maybe I had and still have like a kind of a talent for finding mentors. And that's been really amazing for me in my career, like to have people helping me who still help me, who I can just pick up the phone and call and say, "Hey, what would you do if you're in this situation?" Or "What would your advice be?" So I thought I'd like to create that possibility for younger artists. See if I can help them, find their mentors, whether it's me or other people I can introduce them to, and help them set up a kind of support network so that their careers are not only successful, but that they're also satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started Equilibrium for that purpose, and I wanted to create performance opportunities of a super high level for younger professional artists, working with people I knew, and as well, like doing workshops with them on like discipline, mental discipline, focus, preparation, also incorporating like yoga and sport psychology and Tai Chi, and really like trying to help open up possibilities for a lot of tools that are going to enrich the life of a musician so that we can really have a long-term career and
Mm-hmm.
be healthy.
Let me ask you before I start to wrap up to closing questions. Is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you would like to include in our conversation? Anything that's
Um,
important to you that you never get a chance to speak about in interviews?
yeah. I think, well, I think it's really the thing that I find really important that maybe I do try to speak about it if possible, but it's that thing about creating a situation that no matter what the static is that's going on around, that you can still stay that you somehow find a way to always be able to enter into the music. They always be able to get into the zone of the music no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I found over the course of my career has been able to strengthen.
Right.
And because I do remember, when I was younger, I used to get really nervous or I would get distracted or something difficult would happen during the day and I might not be able to get into the zone when I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point when maybe I was in my 30s, when I realized that door between me and music was always open.
Hmm.
And that was a very special time. And like that moment when I thought, oh, it's open like all the time now. This door is always open. Why didn't I see it before? And some people you can, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you meet musicians young or old or whatever, and they're just always in that zone.
Mm-hmm.
And other times you see people come in and out. And so there was a moment when I felt like, okay, I'm really in now.
Right.
And I think I'm so happy now because I'm 50 now that I stayed in music and that I stayed being a performer and that I didn't stop early. I didn't give it up because I feel like now I just want to keep being able to go further and further and further and further
Mm-hmm.
and become more and more creative and make great programs and put all different kinds of music together and not feel like there's any one formula.
You know, you had mentioned that you're 50. I'm 65. And at this point of our,
Oh,
wow to you as well.
oh, thanks.
But it's a really beautiful point of our lives where we have the experience and the opportunity to give back, and to create change,
Yeah,
and to be a role model to our peers and to encourage each other as artists, and just again make a difference in the world, through art and being who
yeah,
you truly are.
yeah.
So it's nice
I
to hear
think
you
that's
speak about that.
also, yeah, well, I think it's also, that being who you are, or becoming who you are, being authentic is an example to our audiences, whether they're musicians or not, or whatever they do. It's that which is resonating with other people. It's that authenticity and that deep concentration into our thing. So I also find that like that's why I'm kind of really into sport because
Mhm.
top sport, top athletes, they're just in such an intense level of concentration. And I kind of observe it, study it. I'm fascinated by it because we're doing the same thing as musicians. And I think that, through our discipline and through our performance and through our ability to surrender to the flow of what we're working on, I feel like that has a very spiritual place for our audiences and for us as human beings. I think it really is spiritual and also a healthy contribution to the world. Like I was thinking today, all this concentration on making weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather concentrate on, making a beautiful sound.
Being that you're in Europe and you are, yeah, I agree with the audience applause, that you are physically closer to Ukraine. And I'm not even sure what my question is. I mean, I know all of our hearts are breaking for the Ukrainian people, and their courage is exemplary. It's kind of remarkable that they have a president who is an artist who became a president, and he's bringing a lot of many of the attributes that we've been talking about artistically into saving his country and the people that live there. It's pretty remarkable to see. It's an amazing time in the world. I mean, I think my question to you, because you are a world traveler, you are a professional world traveler. You've been traveling for 30 years plus.
30 years, yeah.
And so what do you see? What's your perspective on our world as it continues over the last few years to just get more and more like a sci-fi movie that it's beyond belief?
Yeah, there's a lot of sci-fi, and I don't like sci-fi. I've never liked sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I never liked dystopian books either.
Right.
Like I never liked negativity, and I found the last I guess 8 years maybe pretty heavy. Right now in Europe, what's happening with the concerts is that pretty well every concert has some form of dedication to the Ukraine. Even last week, when we did the Berg Violin Concerto and the Mozart Requiem, the whole festival that we played at was dedicated to the Ukraine. And we started the concert with me singing a solo Ukrainian song about hope. And so we added things to the program. I guess what I see, right now, I see like simultaneous closing and fear. And at the same time, I see a lot of things opening. So my action or my behavior goes towards the opening. And I can always feel if I kind of start closing up from fear, and I have to just keep opening and keep performing and keep giving and hoping that contributes, in I'm sure in ways I don't know, but hopefully in very positive ways, like what, so many musicians are trying to do.
Yeah, well, certainly energetically it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And you're, as you mentioned, you didn't use the word earlier, but you're hyper aware. Your sensitivity
Super
is
sensitive.
You are super sensitive, and you can feel the energetic exchange every time you sing, whether you're on a stage or in a studio or in a rehearsal hall. Or even when you're singing at home and your 3 cats walk by, there's an energetic exchange. They respond.
Oh yeah.
And so that's real. It's tangible. And that's really beautiful that you were able to start a concert with a Ukrainian song.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. So my closing questions that I ask all of our guests are this. First of all, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally?
I think making it, I think it's the same thing. I don't think there's any, for me, there hasn't been like a huge line between the personal and the professional. It's kind of the same um, for me. And I think making it is, if I can be the musician that I know I am under pressure consistently,
Hmm.
and if I can bring, and that includes a lot of joy, and if
Mm.
I can bring that joy to my colleagues, so if it's radiating, that is radiating or resonating with my colleagues, and then it circles out, resonates with the public, and it probably resonates with the public's, with all of our, you know, families, friends, etc., our circle. So that
Hmm.
I think making it is that, but it has to do with being in touch with yourself. It has to do with being yourself.
You remind me, and I've mentioned this a few times in previous episodes, but you mentioned the word joy, and I think it's so important. Uh, it's such an important element of what we do and what our our mission is. And my friend, fellow artist Keb Mo, who's a blues artist, told me one time when we were touring, and he said, we're in the joy business.
Oh,
That's what
that's
we do.
nice.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
and our job is to make sure that we feel healthy and happy and strong. That's our job. It starts in the
Yeah.
morning when we get up. Like you said, you go to the theater early
Oh,
to
yeah.
to do your rituals. Um, and it's the same thing. There's a big intention set. And um, I mean, I'm glad that I've had people, yourself included just now, who remind me of that. Uh, and I feel it's my it's my job to remind people of that as well.
Yeah.
That that's what we do. And it's not limited to being an artist. It's whatever you do in life. Whatever you do in life, we know when we go to the grocery store and there's just that one person who always just has a sparkle in their eye when they're like loading carts of groceries,
Yeah.
but they bring some joy, and those people stand out. They're
Yeah.
making a difference one breath at a time, one person at a time, one connection at a time. With every note that you sing, with every note that I play, with every apple that they shine, or box
Yeah.
of cereal that they put on a shelf. It's not this. We get to do this and you don't. We all need to do this
Yeah. It's that
and
kind
have
of
the opportunity.
conversation. Yeah.
Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Um, uh, First thing I would say is sleep is the best recovery tool.
Is that why
Because,
you were chuckling just now?
well, I was actually I'm chuckling about the second thing I'm going to say, but the first thing I would say is the sleep thing.
Sleep.
Because I really believe that. I think more than studying, I mean, if it's a choice between getting enough sleep or studying, then it has to be getting enough sleep. The reason I was chuckling was because when I asked my teacher, Mary Morrison, if looking back on her career, what would she have done differently? She said, I would have taken more taxis. And I was like, what? And she said, well, I was always trying to save my money, and I'd always take the bus and take the cheapest route and do this and do this. And going back, I would have taken more taxis because of how stressful it was. And I thought of that as a
Mm.
kind of metaphor. I mean, I literally did start taking more taxis, but I also thought of it as a metaphor because it's about, investing in what can help you do your best, which is sleep, which is a good diet, which is traveling with your knives or whatever it is, like, so that you can cook properly for yourself and enjoy putting healthy food into your body, but really caring for that person, because I'll never be a help to anyone else if I'm exhausted or if I'm not focused, or so I think all of my 3 tips have to do with looking after yourself, because only then can you be of service to the
Hmm.
music, to others, etc., etc.
Thank you. By the way, I want to acknowledge the people in our audience have been making written comments, and many of them are at work right now and not able to jump on stage. But Barbara and I, appreciate you joining us while you're at work, and we are so glad that you're enjoying this conversation. At this point of your life, my closing question is, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Well, Terry, it's interesting because I'm not sure I would tell my younger self anything, because I think the mistakes that I made, or the things I discovered by having made the mistakes I made, were really important. So if I told myself in an effort to avoid, then I wouldn't be who I am. Like, I think I probably wouldn't change a thing. I might be embarrassed about some things or regret some things, but I probably wouldn't change a thing.
I appreciate you saying that. That makes a lot of sense, and that's very beautifully said, Barbara. I can relate. I think things in my life as well, even the unpleasant things that happened to me along the way, made me who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all part of who we become and what we do with it, of course.
Yeah, it's still a long way to go.
Yeah, that's true. There was, I worked on a movie a couple of years ago called "If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast." It was an HBO Emmy Award. I think it won, actually. Beautiful conversations. It's a documentary about people in their 90s and older who are living active, vital, interesting lives. Some celebrities, some non-celebrities. But Five-ish Finkel, who is a Broadway star, singer, actor, who was in his 90s at the time. He passed away since, but he was asked, he was being interviewed, and he said, well, I'm halfway through my life, I'm heading into the second half of my life, or, it was something like that. He said it more cleverly, and it was just an aside, and it was so beautiful because there was a twinkle in his eye as he said that. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was very, very sweet. So closing thoughts before we say our goodbyes, and anything else that you would like to close with?
Well, it's been really, I just want to say thank you, because it's been lovely to talk to you. And, I knew when you contacted me, and I looked you up, and I looked at a few things you've done, and I thought, this guy is a really very interesting person, very much from the heart. And I thought, and I was right, that we were going to have a really meaningful hour and a bit together. So I'm thank you for finding me.
You're welcome. I actually consider you a new friend, and that's partially because, so the audience knows, Barbara and I have had sort of a really fun stream of emails back and forth, almost like writing little letters to each other over the last month or so, and in coordinating this. But we've also had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. So that's really a pleasure for me as well. But I want to thank you so much for your time. I also want to thank our live audience, all the people who have been streaming on Facebook Live and Twitch and everywhere else, and everybody who's watching the archive of this. Barbara, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.